Okay, listen, this book had me screaming and I almost cried like 20 times. You're about to watch me read Born of Blood and Ash by Jennifer Armentrout. This is the final book in the Flesh and Fire series. I'll be updating you periodically with my thoughts as I'm reading the book. It's August 13th, aka the release date for Born of Blood and Ash by Jennifer Armentrout. This is the fourth book and final book in the Flesh and Fire series, so it's the conclusion of Sera and Ash's story. Whew. Mentally, I'm not ready for it, but we're gonna go get it anyways because I've been waiting an entire year for this. So let's go get the book. Secured the book because it was release day and it was like in the list of the highly anticipated books. I did get it 20% off, but we're gonna take the sticker off now because I really don't like the way it looks. My expectations are so high for this book because I absolutely love the From Blood and Ash series and From Flesh and Fire series, which that's what this one is. It's so awesome, and you can tell that Jennifer Armentrout has planned this since the beginning and how everything is like connecting. And so what I'm really excited about with this one and kind of what I expect this book to be is the conclusion of Sera and Ash's story and how everything comes to be, so it kind of lines up with the From Blood and Ash timeline. So I definitely have theories of my own, which I will tell you about because they're not spoilers because I haven't read the book yet. So my number one theory that I feel like is a very popular one is that Poppy is Satoria. So we know based on like what we learned, especially so last year, October 31st, when the third book came out, we learned a lot about Satoria and her character and what family line she comes from, and something very distinct are their heart-shaped heads. And we know that that's like a very common thing that's been mentioned about with Poppy. So Satoria is 100% a reincarnation of Poppy. And then there's another character whose name escapes me, but he has like a hawk that he carries with him, or his name is like related to hawks somehow. And he's not like a main character. He's like some other character who's in there, and he cares about Satoria, and he wasn't able to save her the first time that she died. And so he's always kind of felt a little bit guilty about that. My headcanon is that that's Cass. There is no way that the usage of the name Hawk or the Hawk in general is just like a placeholder and just like happens to be something, because we know that Cass went by Hawk in the first book. So yeah, I am really excited. I don't know if that would be revealed in this book, if that theory is correct, or if it's going to be in the actual like main series, the From Blood and Ash. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking, and so I'm gonna continue to see that. So what I'm excited about and kind of what I'm hoping will happen, and I mean, it's the last book, so I imagine it's gonna be wrapped up like, this is a thick guy. And what is gonna be really cool is figuring out like, what is gonna happen with Satoria? What is that going to look like? Because we know Kolis is absolutely obsessed with her. So how do they deal with Kolis? Because we know that he's still an issue in the present day books. And what happens with Satoria? What happens with Sera and Ash? Why do they end up going to sleep? I think that everything is going to be revealed in this book and have everything really just like wrapped up nicely, but also kind of hinting towards what is going to happen in the main series. So yeah, I am really excited about it. And yeah, so without further ado, let's read Born of Blood and Ash by Jennifer Armentrout, which, just a shout out that she's like one of the very few authors who releases the soft cover immediately, and I really respect that. So I'm about 200 pages into Born of Blood and Ash, and here are my thoughts so far. Ash, He is so sweet, and just like, I love the way that he is with Sera so much. It's so cute. I love being back in this world and being with all the characters, even though there are a lot of characters who I could not remember for the life of me who they were, but luckily there's a lot of like kind of reminders about stuff that happened in this book, which is great for me because it's been a year since the last book came out. But I imagine that if I was to read this book immediately after the other book, I probably would be like, okay, I already know this stuff, like, get on with the story. But that isn't the case for me in this case, because this book did just come out and it has been a long time. And so trying to remember like the events of what happened in the book, I remembered like the main stuff, but there was a lot of like smaller things that I didn't really remember. And so it was good to be able to remember this stuff as the story is kind of progressing and we're learning more about like what this means now for Sera as a primal. And I think that it's really cool, and I just love Sera and Ash so much. They're so adorable. I love them. And Sera trying to process while also avoid all of the stuff that happened with Kolis, and kind of thinking like, oh, you know, like other people were treated way worse than I was, but like she's not validating that what happened to her was still bad, and that though other people can also have bad experiences, it doesn't mean that she didn't have a bad experience. Like stuff that Kolis did to her when she was in that cage was horrible and disgusting and ugh. So I think that it's really realistic though, the way that Sera's character is done, and she's running away from this. She's not really wanting to talk about it, and then there's stuff that constantly reminds her about it, so she's getting triggered at times, and then she's just like kind of like pushing it away. And I think that that's really realistic, especially for the type of character that she is. But this poor woman does not need any more trauma. Like, I just want her to be protected. So I'm definitely enjoying the book, and it's really starting to get more into like the story now. So it was more like Sera's awake, what are her powers, what does this mean, and what are they gonna do about Kolis? And so it was just kind of them talking about stuff and planning and really just discovering together. And so now there's a plan in place and they're about to follow through with that plan. So I'm excited to see where that's going to go. And I just love reading about them so much. This book is like 900 pages. I haven't even really made a dent in it yet, and I'm really excited to see like what's gonna happen, what is the final resolution. Like the more and more that I read, I definitely think that Poppy is Satoria. It just makes a lot of sense. And then I think it was Addis or Addis, who I think is the guy I think is Cass. I'm really struggling trying to remember which character I thought it was, but I think it was him because he has like a hawk. I think. It's kind of awkward because it's like, usually when I do these book reviews, I'm like, oh yeah, like this happened, but it's like, this was so long ago and I've read so many books since then that it's like trying to remember the little details is like, it's coming back to me. It's coming back to me as I'm like reading and I'm like, oh yeah, this happened. But yeah, I'm really excited to see where the rest of the story is going to go, how it's gonna wrap itself up and prepare for the From Blood and Ash storyline. So yeah, I'm going to continue to read and I will update you probably around the halfway mark. So I'll see you then. I'm now more than halfway through Born of Blood and Ash, and whew, the slow build up to what just happened in chapter 41 and beyond is like, it was so good. Oh my goodness. Like, I, not gonna lie, was pretty disappointed while I was reading this book because I felt like it just was dragging on and on and on. But it all kind of came to fruition at this point, and I actually do really love the realistic aspect of what Sera is going through after being trapped and really just abused by Kolis, and like thinking that because things didn't end up the way that they did with other people that Kolis would take, like his favorites, and when he would discard them, that she felt that she didn't, like, because nothing happened, that she didn't deserve to feel the way she does about it. And I think that is super realistic, and I think that the way that it's portrayed in this book is really, really well handled and beautiful and tragic. And I really think that it's just like so well done. Would I have liked a bit more action in the beginning of this book? For sure. But I am completely okay with how everything is going along, because really just watching Sera trying to deal with her mental state, and then Ash being the beautiful, lovely man that he is, constantly being there to comfort her and just like be there and listen to her even when she's not ready, just sit there with her. And then like the support from like Nyktos and Jadis and Reaver. Oh, sweet Reaver. It's really funny because like Reaver's like this adorable 10-year-old Draken in this book, but in Blood and Ash he's like this grumpy, sarcastic, like old man dragon at that point. So it's really interesting to be able to see the differences and just see how everything is starting to happen, because I've gotten to the point of the book now where things are really starting to show why the Blood and Ash world is the way that it is, particularly the Blood Forest. That was amazing. That was so good. Everything about that entire like part was incredible. It was like tragic. Like I was stressed with Sera, and like her actions were like, whoa, like watching what she's doing and then watching as she reflects on what happened and what she did and her part to play, and like, I've got a lot of feelings about this. And then Ash, okay, that whole scene, just everything. And then Kolis, that despicable man. I love Kolis as a villain because he's just so like unhinged. He's so obsessed with Satoria, and he thinks that that's love, and the way that he's slowly been corrupted, and then the way that that happens to like other primals and gods, and like what happened to the ancients and everything, like that they do start to lose their humanity. And it's so interesting to see that with Kolis, because we've heard like stories about who Kolis was. We've seen the old Kolis when Sera was with him, like being trapped there and pretending that she was Satoria. And so really being able to see like the stuff that he does and what he did, that man. I have a lot of feelings about the scene that just happened. And of course, like when Sera and Ash were having that conversation and it was too much for her to handle, and then what happened and like with her lake, and then what happened again when like she was talking to Addies and Nyktos, like Sera's been through so much. I feel so bad for her, and like, yeah. So I'm very curious about like what's gonna happen in the next like couple hundred pages left of the book. I think there's 300 or 400. I'm gonna check. There's a little less than 400 pages left of this book, and so yeah, I feel like I'm gonna be like biting my nails for the remainder of this book, because I know that like something's gonna happen with the Ascended, because we know in the Blood and Ash world the Ascended are kind of like the fake versions, but they set themselves up as the real versions, and they're pretty much like vampires. So interested to see how that happens, how the rest of the world is going to be created, and well, not created, but how stuff is going to move around, I guess, because we know that some places that exist in this world, and like village names and city names and all of that, does not, like, it's not the same as it is in the Blood and Ash world. So I'm really excited to see like how that's going to happen and what they do with Kolis, because we know like Kolis is still kind of kicking around, but he is like entombed, if I remember correctly. And so when they all go to sleep, like they all go to sleep, and then eventually they wake up for the Blood and Ash world. And so I'm curious about like how they come to that decision and just what that all looks like. So I'm really excited for these last like 400-ish pages, and I'm also very scared. So I'm going to continue to read Born of Blood and Ash, and I will update you when I finish this book. Wish me luck. I'm very scared. last night I finished Born of Blood and Ash, and oh my goodness, okay, I have a lot of thoughts. I really absolutely adore the way that Sera's trauma was handled in this book by the hands of Kolis. I think that it was so realistic, it was so tastefully handled, and it was just really good because like she's really just struggling with other people had a worse experience with Kolis than I did, so like nothing really happened, and she's constantly telling herself nothing happened, nothing happened, nothing happened, and she's like suppressing all of this horrible stuff that she went through. But then there's stuff that will remind her of it, and then she'll like push it away, and then at one point when everything kind of finally just like bottles up and like explodes, that scene was perfect. Everything about it was just excellent. And Ash, Ash is the perfect man. Everybody needs an Ash in their life. Like Sera and Ash are so amazing together. I absolutely love their love story. I think they're probably one of my favorite couples of all time, to be honest. Like the way that Ash just gets her and the way that she gets him, and I absolutely just, I am in love. I'm absolutely in love with those two together. Another thing I absolutely adored about Sera's character is the relatability of her character. I really love the way that her anxiety was portrayed, and it was so realistic, and honestly I felt it deep in my soul. And the fact that the way that her brain works and the way that she's thinking about stuff, and she's like spiraling, and then she has Ash there to be like, what? I'm not mad at you, what are you talking about? And it's like, oh, I feel you, girl. I feel you so bad. And like the way that she's learning to live with it, and then the way that that ties into like the other stuff that this character has gone through. And I love that there was like so many themes about like you can't get rid of it, it's just something you have to learn to live with, but don't let it control you. And I thought that was excellent. The theme of like, what is the actual difference between justice and vengeance, and when do you go too far in thinking it's justice and it goes to vengeance? And I think that that was just really well done. And like Sera's conversation with Holland broke my heart. Oh, okay, it was really well done. And I love that. And I love that Sera's not perfect. And I love that Ash is not perfect. And I love that they make mistakes. And I love that they kind of blow things out of proportion and then kind of reflect on it. And it's the reflections of these characters that really just make this story so fantastic and so realistic, and make these characters feel like they've actually done these things and you're watching them do these things. And there's definitely times where I was like, Sera, no, don't do that. And she does it and I'm like, come on. And then she's like, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. Or there's other times where I'm like, oh, is she gonna do that? And it's like, bam, she did it. I'm like, yes, Sera, you do it. And then the other thing as well, like the way that Vessus sees Sera and Ash, and the way that Sera has to deal with that, I thought was really well handled. Obviously no spoilers, but I really liked that. And then everything with Addie's character, I'm still convinced that he's Castile. It was never mentioned in this book, so I'm allowed to say this because it's not a spoiler, because nothing has been said, but I'm convinced that Addie's is Castile, because like he's got the dimples, he's got the hawks, like he loves Satoria, like come on, he's gotta be either this, or Jennifer Armentrout is like purposely like trying to trick us and be like, you know, there's a similar guy, but he's not actually the same one. And it's like, okay, it hurts my soul. Also, Sera was so dense. Like by the time you're like 200 pages in, my colleague and I, who are reading the book at the exact same time, she messaged me and she's like, yeah, Sera's definitely and I was like, oh, 100%. And it takes Sera like 800 pages to realize it. And it's like, Sera, I really do think that this was a really great wrap up of Sera and Ash's story, to be continued, of course, in the Blood and Ash series. But as like part of the prequel series, I think that it was really well done. I loved the final chapter of this book. It gave me goosebumps so much. I'm so interested in Callum's story and like where that's going to go. And I feel like I have to like reread the Blood and Ash series now that I know so much, and I can look for all the little like hidden details. But like Callum, wow, like okay, I have a lot of thoughts that I am still trying to like unscramble in my brain, but I would love a story about him, like maybe like a short story about like Callum's story and like how that all happened and like what the end of his story is going to be. I have no idea. And then the same thing for like Sera's sons. We know in the Blood and Ash series that she had 2 sons, and I would love for them to have a story. I would love to learn about like what it was like while they were growing up. How did those events ensue, and like how did that come to be? And it also makes the Blood and Ash series, that scene, even harder. Like, I think it was a really, really surprising scene, to be honest, with like Poppy and her mom and like what happened. And that scene just like hits way harder now that I really understand Sera and Ash's characters. And as much as I absolutely loved the story of Sera and Ash, this book did not need to be like almost 900 pages. I found, especially at the beginning, there was a lot of repetition. It felt like there was a lot of like filler scenes and stuff wasn't really happening too much. Like there was a lot of like talking about stuff that could happen, and it kind of gave me Well of Ascension vibes, where I'm like, please just do something. And then once we kind of got past that, it was like bam, 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 bam. But I think that this book definitely could have been trimmed a little bit more, and it did not need to be as massive, but I still enjoyed it nonetheless because I love those characters and I love the world and how everything like started to add up, and like why certain decisions were made and how the fates intervened. That was good stuff. And so I'm very excited to see, because like we know why the Blood and Ash world is the way it is, but I am still curious about the Craven. Maybe I missed something about that in the Blood and Ash like series, and that's something I probably have to reread to find out, because it has been a while since I read those books. So I will be awarding Born of Blood and Ash a total of 4 stars. I really wanted this to be a 5-star. I really truly did, but everything that I mentioned already is the reason why it's not a 5-star read for me. If the book was cut down a little bit more and stuff happened a little bit more instead of feeling like repetitive, I think this definitely would have been a 5-star read for me. But 4 stars is not bad at all, and I'm gonna miss these characters, but I know they'll be back in Blood and Ash. So the next book that I'm going to be reading is Gilded Curses by Brenda K. Davies. This is the 9th book in the Shadow Realms series, so I'm very excited to continue going back into this world and just having a really good time with these characters. So if you're interested in watching me read the Shadow Realms series or any other series or book that happens to be on my never-ending TBR, definitely hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and turn on the bell notification. That way you get notified anytime a new video comes out. If you are really obsessed with the Flesh and Fire series, or if you really just love Ash and Sera's love as much as I do, or more, definitely hit the like button, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!